Hi there, Vinay here. For today's video, I'm going to be unboxing and reviewing the Sennelier Artist Watercolor Test Pack and comparing it with the Sennelier Student Grade La Petite. So just like my previous video, I'll be sharing my thoughts about this watercolor, if it's worth buying, is it worth the price, how does it compare to other more well-known brands, and basically just a comparison between the artist grade and the La Petite. And I'll also do a swatch of the colors, plus show you some of the test paintings I did. A couple of days ago, I went to an art store to get myself some art materials, specifically the Arches watercolor papers, because there was an online sale. But then I realized after going to the store that in some stores, online sales don't apply to the branch. But they still gave me a discount. I gave up on the Sennelier brand when I first tried out their student grade line. It was a disappointment. And for a time I thought that I wouldn't ever try it again, but then as I watched a couple of other YouTube videos about the Sennelier artist grade paints, I decided to at least give it another go. And when I went to the art store, the test pack wasn't that expensive. For 5 10 ml colors, you can get it for $15 to $20, and that's really cheap. The test pack has 5 10 ml colors, which should last me forever. What makes Sennelier different from other brands is that it uses honey as a binder. Most watercolors and gouache paints use gum arabic as a binder. However, there are other binders available like honey, aquazole from core, and synthetic glycol. You see, the binder has a certain effect on the pigment, and depending on the binder that's used, the way the pigment adheres to the surface of the paper gets affected as well. I wouldn't get all into detail of how that works out, but something interesting to note with using honey is that it also acts as a preservative and an additive that induces more brilliance to the paint. So what this means is that when you layer on the colors, it tends to have more of a vibrant glow. Though I didn't really notice it that much, but probably that's because my style of painting doesn't really have lots of layers. In the test pack, you have 5 colors, namely the lemon yellow, bright red, ultramarine deep, Chinese orange, and Payne's gray. As you may know from my last video, I'm also doing a swatch project for all my colors, and maybe in the future, a few months from now, I'll be able to show you comparisons of the different colors and my different watercolor sets. La Petite Sennelier I got has more colors. While some colors perform very well, they're quite vibrant, some aren't necessarily all that great. Of course, you can't really compare the vibrancy of the colors produced straight out of the tube, because the tube will always win. For the La Petite watercolors, you have the titanium white, primary yellow, orange, primary red, rose permanent or rose madder lacquer, cobalt blue hue, primary blue, deep green, green yellow, yellow ochre, burnt umber, and Payne's gray. The La Petite has very vibrant colors like I said, but some colors are quite pale in comparison to the artist's watercolor counterpart. The Payne's Gray in particular is something I'm not that happy with. In order to get the vibrancy I wanted in some of the paintings, I really had to use up a lot of paint. It's not very fun trying to dig into the well. There's a part of me that didn't like the consistency of the paint. It felt a little bit sticky. I would say it kind of reminds me of glue, where you mix white glue with some sort of paint. That's how it felt for me when I used such a strong mixture of the Payne's Gray just to make it pop out more. But then the good thing is once I finish up the Payne's Gray paint, I can replace it with the Artist Watercolor brand that I have. So in this video, I painted 3 artworks just to show you a comparison. You should know that you only really need 3 colors to create a range of other colors that you want for any painting. And that's red, yellow, and blue. And I'm really thankful that the test pack has those colors. You call this RGB. Something interesting is that our computers use this technology for our screens. And we also have CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. I just realized that they didn't use CMYB because B already stands for blue. So thanks, Google. Other light-fast ratings for the La Petite watercolors. Not all of them are rated. Their orange and primary red don't have the ratings, which is quite weird, nor do you have the pigment information. I would assume the pigments are different because when I was comparing 2 colors side by side, the Payne's Gray was a little bluer than the Payne's Gray of the Artist Watercolor brand. I might be wrong though. For today's painting, I did different attempts to create the line art. For the first one, I used Paint Studio's 3D model and sketched over it, and started doing the line art digitally. After which I printed it on parchment paper, and instead of transferring the pencil from the back, which is what I did with the Kohinoor artwork, I tested out if my light pad or box would be easier, and it proved to be a challenge because my paper was too thick for the lines to actually show through. I guess it only really works for tracing paper. midway through the painting, I realized that there was something wrong with the proportions, and I almost gave up on it. But after all the work I did, I didn't really want to waste that painting, so I had the bright idea to go over it with ink, and this is how it survived. It looks kind of okay, I think. I'm actually quite happy with it, so I managed to salvage it. Moving on, I was trying to draw mushrooms the other day and decided to draw an original character, which is a mushroom girl, because I didn't really have a name for her. She's an original character I've been painting since 2015, but I stopped working on her character because I got more focused in work, and now I'm just like trying to return to art. So this time, a different approach. I first sketched on paper and then scanned it, and then traced over the drawing in Clip Studio Paint. There was a sale in Clip Studio Paint, and I decided to get it as an investment because my Photoshop wasn't working. I wanted the theme to be more like an adventure, and I want to work on my background skills, so it's probably not the best, but I'm quite happy with it. And tracing over your works is actually quite therapeutic. I enjoy doing it. I also drew my pet hognose. So hognose sticks are quite cute. They have like a weird upturned nose. They use that for digging and stuff. But anyway, after I finished the sketch, I printed it directly on my thinner Canson XL mixed media paper, which isn't the best paper I've used for watercolor. But I just wanted to see how Sennelier paints would perform on a more readily available brand. I know that I should be using the art supplies that I like instead of using the cheaper brands, which is something that I've been doing for the past few years. After finishing this painting, which I named The Hunt, I decided to redo the painting with a student grade brand as a comparison, but I really fell out of love for it. When I painted, it was quite nice, it was vibrant, but then I couldn't get the dark colors that I wanted. I mean, both have sort of a charm, but I really wish that there was a darker color that I could use. So the verdict is, and the obvious one at that, is the Sennelier artist grade paints are worth more than the La Petite, even if you just get the test pack, because it's so cheap. And even if the individual colors are twice the price of the student grade paints, the pigment quality makes up for it, as you can see. And it's possible to get an assortment of color values from just a small amount of colors, if you know how to mix your paints well. The good thing is, when you have a limited palette, your painting looks more cohesive. But this is something that I wish I would learn as I go to, is to ensure that I plan my paintings a little bit more way ahead of time before I start painting on the actual subject, or at least have more references so I can actually pull out the colors that I want and make them more sort of realistic. So is it worth buying? Definitely. Like, if you have the budget for it, you should probably try out the Sennelier artist brand. And if you are curious, you can also get the La Petite, but I would just go for the artist watercolor. And I've heard that Sennelier is famous for its earthy tones. It's not something that you can easily find in comparison to the other paints. So I don't know that for myself, but I did enjoy the orange, which is sort of like an earthy brownish orange yellow for me. It's quite nice. How does it compare to my other watercolor paints? Well, for me, my number one paint would always be Schminke. It's comparable to the M. Graham paints that I have. It's not as flowy as Core, and I think it's a lot better than Winsor & Newton, but that's just me. And I feel like if you really want to get to know your paints, you should try them out and see for yourself. As you can see, swatching doesn't really do anything. You get to see how vibrant the color lays down on the paper, but painting with it is how you get to know your paints a bit more, how they layer on top of each other, if they stain, and if they can handle mixing while wet and wet, and then all those other techniques. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. I plan to do more of these types. You can also check out my Kohinoor watercolor review.